afternoon, good evening. My name is Adam Vaughan. I'm the Parliamentary Secretary for Housing and Urban Affairs and work with the Minister Jean-Yves Duclos on largely the housing file. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territories of the Mi'kmaq people. And when I was here in the summertime doing a town hall on homelessness, a Mi'kmaq elder talked about three teachings that I think define what we're about to hear from the Premier of Ontario. They talked about the need for safe journey. They talked about the need for wise counsel. But they talked about the need for provision for all. And those are the thinking and the words that guide their work as they move about this part of the world for a millennium. And as we sit here in Halifax today, we're about to focus in on that notion of provision for all. Kathleen Wynne, like myself, we lived in a neighborhood together when I first met her, and she was fighting a very bad Conservative government in Ontario at Queen's Park, and fighting them over what they did to Toronto with amalgamation. A ridiculous idea was to save money. What they did is they broke the city, they broke the government, and they also broke the educational system. And when she chose to run and fix those problems, most people said what they said to me when I chose to run for the Liberal Party. They said, "We thought you were a New Democrat." She's too progressive for that. Much too progressive for that. And the reason she fought those Conservative governments is because, well, as I said, I come from Toronto, and we know that sometimes the only thing that Conservative governments can do is break things quickly. And I was on City Council with that mayor, and it's sad that Rob passed away, but Rob had is perhaps better known for his struggle with drugs. His brother is different. He's an entrepreneur. Oh, and he also inherited a family business and thinks of himself as a businessman. His brother doesn't quite understand what the government of Ontario does. You know, some had said we're stoking fear by saying he's talking about a woman's right to choose and control her reproductive rights, and that somebody suggested that he was going to roll back R versus Morgentaler. The reality is Doug doesn't even know how to do that. Doug thinks Roe versus Wade is the decision the kids he brings up to his cottage have to make when the jet ski doesn't work. But this is a serious election. This is a serious election. If you take a look at what Kathleen Wynne and the Liberal government in Ontario has achieved over the last few years, on transit, the largest investment in rail anywhere in the world right now. If you live in the 905, when was the last time a GO train broke down? If you think about smog days and brownouts, which defined Tory rule while they were in power, we haven't had a smog day or a brownout since she took office, since McGuinty took office. That doesn't happen by accident. On housing, on education, on childcare, on pharmacare, all of the major policy initiatives we're pursuing up in Ottawa require strong provincial partners to be realized on the ground in people's lives. And Kathleen Wynne and the provincial government in Ontario is one of the most important provincial partners. And we will not get what we need done up in Ottawa if one thing doesn't happen. And that's this. We need this Premier to win. We need a Premier in Ontario to win. We need a Premier win in Ontario, because when Wynne wins in Ontario, we win right across the country. Ladies and gentlemen, the Premier of Ontario, the next Premier of Ontario, the best Premier our province has ever had, Kathleen Wynne.
To see you. Wow. What a great room. Prime Minister, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for staying. It is wonderful to be here with all of you. Thank you. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Je suis ravie. Je suis aux oiseaux d'être ici parmi vous ce soir. Thank you so much. It's just beautiful to look out at this room, to see all of you great Liberals, the diverse face of Canada. It is just a thrill to be here, and I can tell you, between the ice and Doug Ford, it's been a hell of a week in Ontario. So I'm really glad to be here. I'm going to suck your energy for the next 24 hours. It's wonderful to be here. So I want to just thank Adam Vaughan and all of the Liberal team here in Ottawa. Thank you so much for what you do. You know, Adam said you need strong provincial partners. Well, we are so grateful to have a strong federal partner. It is the best. Thank you. And I think there are a couple of my really tall colleagues here. Premier McNeil, thank you for welcoming us to Nova Scotia. You're somewhere. Premier Ball, it's great to see you. And any of the other premiers who are in the room, but really all of you, thank you so much. It's just great to be here. And I want to talk today, I want to talk a little bit about what we're confronting in Ontario, but I'm going to start with the context in which we're working. You know, we all in this room share a value system. We share a value system that the Prime Minister expresses every single time he speaks. And that is that government is a force for good and must be a force for good. Government exists to do the things that we can't do by ourselves. That's why we have government. And so we come together and we figure out how to look after each other. What are the things that people need in order to make their lives the very best that they can be? That's the value system that we share. And that is what I am afraid is at risk in Ontario. And so I'm going to come back to that. So what's the context that we're working in? All of us across the country, we're operating in a changing world. It's a changing economy because we're dealing with climate change. We are dealing with technological change. We talk to people every day, all of us in our lives, people who are wondering, what is it going to be like for me in a few years? What are my kids going to do? What's work going to look like? What are the jobs they are going to have? Am I going to be able to look after my parents or my grandparents? Those are questions that don't have simple answers. And people are seeing the world change around them, and they're seeing the world change at a pace that they haven't experienced before. And so that creates uncertainty. And not only that, they look south of the border to our partner, and they wonder, what's that relationship going to be look like? Having said that, Chrystia Freeland, Prime Minister, you're doing an awesome job, backed up by us. It's going to be fine. But people read in the newspaper that there are questions, you know, and they wonder. They look at Europe and they wonder, what's going on with Brexit? What is that about? So that's the container that we're operating in, and there are lots of questions about that. So what I believe is that it's up to government to tackle those things. You know, I was in Brantford a few weeks ago because of the flooding. And I was at one of the warming centers, and a man came across the street. He knew I was there, and he came across the street to talk to me about his life and what had been going on with him. His mom had gotten sick. He had to look after her. He ended up losing his job. He was dealing with some mental health issues, and he felt like his life was falling apart. And then he applied to the basic income pilot. And he's on the basic income, and he came across the street to tell me how it had changed his life. How he was able now, he was able to get his car back on the road. He didn't have to worry where his food was coming from, and he was able to think about what might come next and how he might get his life on track. So we owe it to all of our constituents, everyone, all the people in our communities, to try everything that we can to find ways to put some certainty back into their lives. And if not to come up with absolute answers to the questions that they're dealing with, at least tackle them, at least acknowledge them, and try to find ways to help out. So that's what we're doing to tackle the economy. And here's, I think there was another picture back there. It's not supposed to be at that one yet. Well, anyway, we'll look at this one. So our plan is about putting in place those supports. And contrary to the belief of this cartoonist, I'm not actually trying to be Oprah Winfrey. I'm not actually trying to throw around indiscriminate programming or money. what I believe is that we need to tackle those challenges. So basic income pilot is one thing that we are doing. But we made a decision. Yeah, it's a good thing. We made a decision in our, we've made a decision in our plan, and the most recent expression of that is our budget, but we've been working for a number of years to do the things that will help people to look after themselves and to look after their families. So, you know, we looked at free tuition because we knew that there were young people who were not able to go to post-secondary because they were worried about accruing debt. They were worried about how much they were going to have to pay, and so they just didn't even apply. A young woman named Renisha phoned me. She got in touch with me. Actually, she sent me an email, and then we talked on the phone. She is in college right now. She's a single mom. She's got a toddler, and she's got a son in grade 10, and she is in college getting 94% in her program, and she's only there because of free tuition. And what that means is she's going to, exactly. She's going to be able to have a better opportunity in the economy. She's going to be able to do what she knows she's capable of, but more than that, her son, who's in grade 10, has seen his mom go back to school, and that opens up a whole world for him that otherwise wouldn't have been opened up. But she's got a toddler, and she actually needs childcare. She can't find childcare. She's putting it together. But what we know is that we need to move ahead on childcare. So we've said in our most recent budget, we're going to provide free preschool childcare for every child from 2.5 to 4 years old. And that builds on full-day kindergarten that's been in place for years now in Ontario, that when I was Minister of Education, we rolled out. And yes, it is a great start for kids, but it is also $6,000 a year per child that families save by having access to full-day kindergarten. So those are the kinds of things that we are putting in place to make sure that people have the supports that they need. We're raising the minimum wage. In Ontario, people were earning $11.40 an hour, $11.60 an hour in October. It's not enough. They were not able to look after themselves. People working 40 hours a week, earning $11.60 an hour, were going to the food bank. And so we said, you know what, with an economy that's growing, because Ontario's doing pretty well, it's not great, and there's more that we can do, but our unemployment rate is at the lowest it's been in 20 years, and we're one of the leading jurisdictions in economic growth in the country. It's time. We need to raise the minimum wage. It's $14 an hour now. It'll go to $15 an hour on January 1st, 2019, because if you work full-time in Ontario, you should be able to feed yourselves and your families. Yeah. And we said, you know, we know that, as I said, people are worried about how they're going to be able to look after their loved ones, their grandparents, their parents. There are people, many, thousands of them, walking around who are my age or a little bit older, who have a child and maybe some grandchildren, but they've also got grandparents or parents. My parents are 89 and 92, and I'm not going to pretend that I do a lot of the caregiving. There are three other sisters than me, and luckily one of them's got some flexible time. But my job is to make sure that on a weekly basis somehow food gets delivered, that they have fresh food. They've got care, but make sure that they have fresh food. And that's a little thing, but the point I'm making is that there are thousands and thousands of people many of them women, but many of them men, walking around with those stresses of both generations on either side of them. And so what we've said is, you know what, we need to put some more supports in place for those people. We need more supports. We need more home care. We need to make sure that people have access to long-term care when and if they need it. So we're building 30,000 more long-term care beds. We're putting more money into home care, and we're giving families $750 a year to offset some of those costs that they have on a weekly basis. So those are the kinds of things that we are putting in place in order to deal with that uncertainty that I was talking about. I'm going to go back to this slide for a second, because when we brought out our budget and those pillars were in our budget, this was the kind of reaction that we got. But I just want to say, it's bold what we're doing. We made an intentional decision to go into deficit in order to put those care supports in place, but it's not radical. It is what people need right now. And if we don't invest in people, then the cost down the road is way, way higher. So that's why we made that decision. This picture, I'm at a kids treatment center in Oakville, Erin Oak, and this little girl is on the autism spectrum. She was lovely, and she decided she was going to do my hair because she has a hairdresser's smock on. And my staff were freaking out because she was going to comb my hair down in front of my face. But we were there because we were talking about this plan, these supports. And one of the pieces of our plan has been to move on pharmacare, to move on free prescription medication for people of Ontario. So OHIP Plus is the name of the plan that we put in place. Look, Medicare was put in place in the 60s. My grandfather was a GP, my dad was a GP, so my grandfather started practicing medicine in 1924, and my dad started practicing medicine in 1952. So my grandfather, of course, never practiced medicine when we had Medicare, and my dad straddled the two systems. One of the recurring stories that came up in my family when I was growing up was about people who couldn't pay their doctor's bills. So my grandfather used to talk about people leaving baked goods on the step to pay for their medical bills. And when I was first campaigning to be an MPP in Don Valley West, I knocked on the door of an elderly woman. She was in her 80s, and she had figured out from the news reports, because she hadn't met me yet, but she'd figured out that I was the granddaughter of her doctor. And her doctor had given her an opportunity to work in his office, which was in his house in North Toronto. And she figured out when she was a little bit older that he had done that because she was working off the family's bill, because the family couldn't pay for it. He'd never said that, but that's what she figured out. So, you know, I know that we did a great, great thing, and it's the finest expression of how we care for each other, that we have publicly funded universal health care in this country, and so that we can be very proud of. But I think if we were to do it again, if we were doing it today, we'd recognize that there are a couple of gaps. Dental care is a gap, and pharmacare is a gap. And we need to move ahead. And so what we've done in Ontario, as I said, OHIP Plus, every child from their birth till their 25th birthday now has access to free prescription medication. All they need is their health card. Their parents go in, they've got a health card, they get their prescription filled for all the drugs on the formulary. 4,400 medications. And next year, seniors will have the same. They won't pay a deductible, they won't pay copay, they'll just show their health card. So I say to all of you, I know we can do this. And I want to thank the Prime Minister for stealing Eric Hoskins. I want to thank you. And I want to thank you because Eric believes this in his soul. He believes that this is something that we must do, and I know we can figure out a way to do that. And so I look forward to working with you across the country as we move ahead to have pharmacare in place for everyone in this country. So, all of that, all of those things that I have talked about, all of those things that we believe in so deeply, all of that care that we know we are capable of, we know is critical to people's lives in Ontario is actually at risk. It is actually at risk. And, you know, we know it's at risk because Doug Ford has said he's not going to fight climate change. He said he's not going to increase the minimum wage. And he said he's going to cut the taxes of the wealthiest in the province, wealthy corporations. He also said that it was a crazed idea. He didn't use that language, but he said that our child care plan was laughable because it was being put in place for unborn children. And I just ask you, what does government exist to do if not lay the foundation for unborn children? What are we here for? I can't imagine a more clear mandate for government than do what you need to do right now for people who need you, but for heaven's sake, think about children. And we just listened to First Nations leaders. Think about not just children in your family, grandchildren. Think about great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren, because that's our job, is to steward our society so that it is in great shape into the future. And that's what we're trying to do. That's what everyone in this room is trying to do, is put the building blocks in place so that we can sustain ourselves as that great, multicultural, harmonious society that we aspire to. We're not there yet. It's not perfect, but we all are trying so hard to put those building blocks in place. So that's not what this man wants to do. What he wants to do is undermine those things that we know have supported people for so many years and that we need to keep investing in. So what I know is that I have to stand up to this. I cannot pretend that the way Doug Ford campaigns is not like Trump. The fact is, he is sloganeering. He ascribes to a politics that is vicious, that traffics in lies and smears. And, you know, he may be like Trump. I am not Hillary Clinton. And I'm going to have to do it differently. And I love Michelle Obama, and I loved when she said, when they go low, we go high. But then Trump got elected. And so I'm going to have to, and I am going to stand up for our values. I'm going to fight. Thank you. I'm going to fight with all that I've got, with all of the energy that I've got, with all of the good humor that I've got, because it's going to take a lot of good humor, my friends, to get through the next few weeks. But it is so important that we stand up for the people, for the children, for the moms, for the dads, for the aunts, for the grandparents and parents who have built this province, this country. It's so important that we be very clear about what's at risk, that we be very clear that if Doug Ford, and you know, this is important in Ontario, of course, but it's important across the country, because this kind of sloganeering and this kind of populism, it's not isolated to Ontario. And so it's really important that we make it clear that if 75,000 jobs are lost, that means teachers, that means nurses, it means people who are providing care for that little child who was combing my hair. It means that we undermine those public services that deliver the support to people when they need it. Because he's saying he can cut $10 billion out of those services and everybody will be okay. Everyone can just fend for themselves. It's just not true. You can't do that. You can't take that kind of money out of services and then say everything's all right. And in fact, the most recent thing that Doug Ford has said is, he said to municipalities, we'll keep, if he's the premier, he'll keep funding infrastructure, but only if municipalities cut their budgets and find efficiencies. Efficiencies are cuts in the mouths of Conservatives. That's what they are, and we are not going to let that happen. So, here's my ask. I ran in 1994, when Adam and I lived in the same neighborhood. I ran for school trustee in 1994. I lost by 72 votes. And I am determined that we are not going to lose to Doug Ford because we didn't knock on the last 72 doors. We're going to knock on every door. And what that means is that I need all of you. I need all of you who can help us. You know, I need you to be there with us because it is important for Ontario. It's not important for any one particular politician. You know, the pundits and the media ask me about my ratings, my numbers, you know, and how do I feel, and am I okay? Does it hurt my feelings? What hurts my feelings is if kids can't get the schooling that they need, if people with disabilities can't get the support they need, if seniors can't get the home care that they need, and if people can't earn a living wage, that's what hurts my feelings. So I love this Liberal family. And I hope that we can just dig down into the love and support that we feel for each other, and we can find a way to defeat in Ontario this brand of politics. I hope that we will be standing side by side. We'll defeat this brand of politics in Ontario, and then we'll do it right across the country. Thank you so much, my friends. Merci, miigwech.